Okay, listen, we are in full black for morning of the end of an era. If you're new to Formula One, I want you to imagine what it would feel like if Michael Jordan left the Bulls to play for the Celtics. If you don't want a sports analogy, think about what it was like when Zayn announced that he was leaving One Direction, or when Nick Jonas sat his brothers down and said, I think you guys are holding me back. We gotta break up the band. That is as much of a similarity as I can give you. That's the best picture that I can paint you to let you know what it felt like to wake up this morning at 8 a.m. and find out that Lewis Hamilton was in fact officially leaving Mercedes to drive for Ferrari in 2025. I am unwell. You know that dog that's like sitting with a newspaper at a dining room table with fire everywhere? Yeah, that's what being a Formula One fan feels like today. 7-time world champion, 8 if you ask the right people, Lewis Hamilton is moving to Ferrari. And I wanted to take a little bit of time to break down what exactly is going on, why it's happening, what the contract negotiations might have looked like, and what 2025 looks like for us. And I know you're used to meeting me in a short form context, but look, we just didn't have enough space. This was way too much for a minute. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's time to talk about what's going on. So beyond just the base level of shock of Lewis leaving Mercedes to begin with, and especially to go to Ferrari, one of the parts that may be kind of confusing to you about the situation is that Lewis actually announced that he had renewed his contract with Mercedes through the end of 2025. That contract extension was announced back in August of 2023, and George Russell, who has the other seat at Mercedes, also has a contract that goes through 2025. So it seemed like Mercedes' setup was pretty locked down all the way through 2025. But the big part of this announcement, which Mercedes acknowledged in their press release, was that Lewis actually exercised an early release clause in his contract to be able to leave. And the other big part is, I don't know if you guys remember, but in that announcement, Lewis made some points about how he basically felt like Mercedes was home and heavily implied he intended to kind of finish his career there. But now we're looking at a multi-year contract with Ferrari, which means that he's probably looking to end his career there. So the big question for me on this is timeline. We know as of the end of August, like basically about 6 months ago, Lewis was pretty happy at Mercedes. So what happened in between those 6 months and now that made him think, I gotta go? And why was Ferrari his choice? The main thing with this Ferrari news is that I think there are two people who Lewis would have based this decision on. So when I was looking back at things, I realized there was a little bit of drama that we forgot about. Right before Lewis announced his 2-year extension with Mercedes, Fred Vasseur was interviewed and said that he regularly talks to Lewis Hamilton. In fact, he talks to him at every race. Now, I think Fred Vasseur is a big part of why this move happened. Lewis and Fred are known to have a close relationship, and I think Fred was also kind of trying to make that relationship known when his contract was up in the air. And this is not the first time there have been rumors of Lewis moving to Ferrari. It's just the first time it's actually become true. If you saw my reaction originally, like last night, you know that I was like, there's no way this could happen. Spoiler alert. But Lewis actually won his GP2, which is now known as Formula 2 championship, with Fred. He's raced with him before. He feels comfortable with him. It makes sense for that to be a relationship that he would potentially want to continue. And based on that interview, it's also a relationship that Fred wanted to be known as a little bit more public, which I think boasted those original rumors that he might be moving to Ferrari. And then there's the Charles Leclerc of it all. Because the joke of it all is that silly season started before the season even started. We saw Charles confirm a multi-year extension as well as a little drop of a song that he wrote originally for the video, if you watched that. Oh my God, I just realized... I promise I will get back to the facts, but I just realized the only two musical drivers are on the same team now. Do we think there's any chance that do we think there's any chance that Charles is going to compose a piano piece for Lewis to sing on? I don't know if I can finish this video. Okay, I've composed myself. Where was I? Lewis and Fred, Charles. Oh my God, here we go. Okay, so Charles extended for an undetermined amount of years. Lewis has now signed a contract for an undetermined number of years, and it seems like we're gonna have a pretty strong relationship there. But the part of it I do want to know about is when the timing of this Lewis announcement happened. I do think that it seems like potentially this conversation was happening before he even signed the 2-year extension. And the other thing people may be wondering, which I'm kind of wondering myself, how much credence did those Red Bull rumors actually have? Did Lewis actually talk to Christian Horner about leaving? But ultimately, we do know that this came as a shock to the Mercedes team. This morning, the entire team had a meeting that lasted exactly 10 minutes where the team was told that Lewis was in fact leaving and going to Ferrari. It's being reported that Lewis only told Toto last night, and it seems like those rumors are probably true because Toto actually phoned into that meeting rather than showing up in person, meaning that wherever he was when he found out, he couldn't get on a jet and get there, which ultimately leads me to want to know one thing. Was this announcement supposed to come out today, and why was it so rushed? There are a couple of theories that people feel like this rumor was leaked by F1 to try to take some of the focus off of the Andretti announcement that came out yesterday, which if you missed missed that, basically Michael Andretti from Andretti Autosport had submitted a bid last year to become the 11th team on the grid for Formula One. The FIA approved that last year, which basically just meant that they had everything they were supposed to have for a bid to be successful. That was then passed on to F1 themselves, who yesterday officially announced that they were not allowing him to come onto the grid. Now that was also done in a way that was a little dramatic because they said a couple of things that I thought were a little out of pocket. The biggest one, which I think also is part of where the press of kind of negativity came from, being that F1 felt that at this moment, Andretti would receive more press from being a part of F1 than the Andretti name would bring to F1. There were a couple of other legitimate gripes of why they would not bring him on right now, and that the fact that they would allow a bid for 2028 to be a potential situation. It also seems like maybe Andretti didn't show up for an in-person meeting that F1 had requested, which is sort of a negative there. However, some people are speculating that this announcement about Lewis was not supposed to come out today, and that it was put out in an attempt to distract from that conversation about Andretti not being allowed to move onto the grid. I'm not sure. I feel like it is a hard conversation to figure out like who leaked it, was supposed to be leaked. All I know is that it does seem sudden, shocking and sudden. And so what I want to know is what happened between the end of August and today that made Lewis Hamilton certain he was not going to win another championship with Mercedes, because that's the only reason I see him leaving. That or something horrendous happened and he just couldn't deal with it anymore, but it also seems like that would have come out today too. I just talk with my hands and my stand said you did it. I didn't do it. The robots are never going to take over because they're stupid. The point is, there's something that Lewis saw that either told him there's no way I'm winning a championship here at Mercedes, or I'm definitely going to win a championship here at Ferrari, which leads us to the question of this first driver, second driver situation. There have been a lot of clips that have been resurfacing today that show Charles talking about how Lewis is his ideal teammate and how he could learn a lot from him. I also feel like we should be talking a little bit more about that video of Lewis like organizing Charles into the right spot to take a photo and then like posting the photo and being like, yeah, you look good. It's clear that they have a good relationship. I just don't know what that relationship looks like when both of them want to be champions and both of them have the caliber to do so. Is Charles taking a back seat for a couple of years, learning from Lewis, as he said, and then kind of taking over after Lewis retires? Are they going to focus on winning Lewis one more championship before they then move over to have Charles win his championship? I don't know. That is the part that I really can't put together here, is like, where does it make sense for Lewis and Charles, two number one drivers, to share the spotlight at a place that generally doesn't have the best strategy decisions? But what does this mean for the rest of the grid? Carlos put out a statement that also made it seem like he was not really made aware of this situation prior to today. It was a very short 2-sentence statement, and I want to read it specifically because I think it actually showed how sudden this statement was. He said, following today's news, Scuderia Ferrari and myself will part ways at the end of 2024. We still have a long season ahead of us, like always, and I will give my absolute best for the team and the Tifosi around the world. News about my future will be announced in due course. Okay. To me, that means I didn't know about this and I found out about it around the same time you did, maybe a couple of minutes before all of those statements hit, somewhere in that rumor mill last night. He also doesn't have a plan and he's hopeful to have one soon. So the question is, where does Carlos go? Obviously, this is going to be a little bit of a mess for both Mercedes and Ferrari for this news coming out prior to the season even starting. Mercedes has to think about prioritizing their future with George. Ferrari's going to prioritize Charles for sure. And Carlos is now on the hunt for a seat for 2025. So what seats are open and who else is expiring their contracts at the end of this season? The first one that everyone's going to be thinking about is Checo Perez for 2024, which that seemed like a pretty uncertain whether or not that was going to be continued to begin with. Things are pretty stable at McLaren. Lando Norris announced that he was continuing on earlier this week. Fernando Alonso is up at the end of this year. Both drivers over at Alpine will be up, with both Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly's contracts expiring. Williams seats are both up too, with Alex Albon and America's favorite Logan Sargent. Visa Cash App RB is going to be over too. Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda's contracts both expire this year. Stake as well, and Haas. So we have a lot of seats available, and I do think we're going to have a big silly season. The question is just that these big drivers have already been confirmed. So where does Carlos go and who takes Lewis's seat? The big rumor that's out there right now is that that seat might go to Fernando Alonso. And the other big conspiracy theory that I have seen, and maybe nothing would shock me anymore, is that Sebastian Vettel may be coming back to that Red Bull seat. I don't know about that, but I do know that they have been posting a significant amount of social media that is kind of going back through his whole glory area with them, and I could see it. I could see anything now. Lewis is gone. Lewis is driving for Ferrari. Nothing is ridiculous anymore. The other possibility that would be interesting at Mercedes would be Alex Albon. I don't know that we're going to see this, but I do think that we've seen Alex consistently perform above the level that he is given. He had a rough go of it over at Red Bull before he ended up going over to Williams. And to be honest, I kind of would like to see what he does in a premier seat. So rumor mill, most likely for Lewis's seat, we're looking at either Fernando Alonso or my baby boy Alex Albon. The question is going to be how much focus they're putting on George, if they're looking for someone who complements George, or if they're looking at someone who would take over the first seat position and keep George in the second. If you have any theories, you should should be leaving them in the comments right below right now. And then the question for Carlos is, I don't know the answer to that. There were rumors that he would probably move over to Audi once they took over for Alfa Romeo in full, mostly given his dad's connections to Audi, but that takeover doesn't take place until 2026. However, at present, we do know them as stake F1 team, and depending on what Valtteri wants to do, I could see Carlos potentially taking one of those seats that will open up at the end of this season, and just making that move a year early before Audi takes over. So look, am I ready for the amount of therapy I'm gonna need watching Lewis take over in Ferrari? I don't think so. Are any of us? But I do think we have a massive silly season still to come. But ultimately, I wanna know what you guys think. Do you think this timeline makes sense? Do you think this contract negotiation was supposed to come out today? What do you think happened between the end of August and today? Why did Lewis only let Toto know yesterday? And what is it about Ferrari that makes him wanna move? How do we feel Lewis and Charles are gonna work together? And is Carlos Sainz gonna have a seat in 2025? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to talk about this one. And since this is my first YouTube video, I don't have like a fun outro. I guess we'll be back soon to talk about more stuff. Yay, sports. Let's go with, I want this video to be over, so I'll talk to you soon.